Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. I'm your host, Ed Dentzel. Yes, you know it's me. You know the voice. Hope everybody's having a great week. It was an ugly day here in Madeira Beach, Florida. Rainy. Not too cold, though. I think it's going to be nice this weekend. You can email me at edwarddentzel@reagan.com. And you can follow me on Twitter, Dentzel Domain, all one word, no space in between. I think I told you that I now have over 10,000 followers, all real people, most of them conservatives. I do have some liberal followers, and I want to talk about that in a second, but I've gone over 10,000 people. I got there after my account was suspended this past weekend, for what Twitter said was the wrong reasons. I don't know whether I can believe them or not. Was it because of something I did? Is it because I'm conservative? You know, those stories are out there that Twitter's cracking down on certain types of speech on their social media site, especially when the topic is conservatism and conservatives on there. I should say something about Twitter, and I'm meaning to say this, and this is a little bit political, but it's also business related, that Twitter's stock has been going down, down, down. In fact, it's one of the few social media companies where its stock has been tanking. I just saw Facebook's earnings going through the roof, making Mark Zuckerberg the sixth richest person, is it in the world or in the United States? I forget, but he's up there. He's in the billions. But Twitter has been going the opposite direction. And in fact, the CEO or the guy who started Twitter isn't even a billionaire anymore. That's how much the stock has come down. And I think the reason, part of it, is because Twitter isn't what it used to be. It used to be a little bit more of a free-for-all on there. Granted, it's not as user-friendly. I think it's a little harder to understand what's going on there than on Facebook. And Twitter is geared, I think, toward certain types of people. I think Facebook is open to a lot more people. And Twitter also tends to be a little bit more of a top-down approach. You know, these very popular people on there, and then there's everybody else. Whereas on Facebook, you have your friends on there, and you talk back and forth. It's just a little bit different of a medium. But Twitter's really cracked down on how many people you can follow, how many people you can unfollow in a day. Of course, what you can talk about on there. And I don't think it's a coincidence that its stock has gone down as they've made the rules on there tougher and tougher. They say that they're trying to make a better user experience. I'm not so sure that the users agree. So, I don't know what it's the last year. I couldn't tell you the percentage that it's down, but it seems every time I tune into Fox Business, when I watch it online, they're talking about Twitter has dropped again. I think if Twitter went back to the way it was, I think you'd have more people interested and it would go in the opposite direction. Just a feeling that I have. I should say something else about Twitter, and this goes to the politics of it. I do follow liberals on there. If a person is using hashtags that interest me, then I will follow that person. The funny thing is sometimes liberals use conservative hashtags, and it is just about as predictable as the sun rising in the east, that when I follow a liberal, and that liberal, even if it's just a regular liberal, I'm not following any famous liberals, but just a liberal person out there, average liberal out there, they think that I'm going to troll them. You could see the message comes to me, what are you going to do, troll me? Troll alert. I can tell you I do not troll liberals on my Twitter account. I do not go out of my way to send direct messages or specific messages to any particular liberal on there. In fact, I don't I talk to a few conservatives here and there, but really it's just if they send me a message. If a liberal sends me some, I've told you, I get some F-bombs, some S-bombs, I don't feed the trolls. I do not respond to them. They're the ones who come after me. I do not go after them. Yes, my tweets may be anti-liberal, but they are surely not gauged to anybody in particular who's following me. I can guarantee you that. Any of the liberals, it's just the liberals in general. I am not a troll, even though people try to troll me. It's just funny. They see a conservative following them, and they automatically think that I'm going to do something, whereas I'm really not like that. I just do not have, and that's not my personality. I just don't have the time. It's just kind of funny. Did you know today, I'm just glad that I'm almost 6 minutes into the show and I haven't talked about the debate tonight yet. By the time you're listening to the show, the debate's over. I'm recording this show before the debate happens, as is usually the case. But I want to talk about something else that I think is important. Today marked 30 years since the Challenger exploded. 30 years. I remember where I was when it happened. I did not see it happen live. In fact, I remember where I was when Columbia broke apart as well, coming back to Earth. I remember that. I was working at Star Trek The Experience at the time. But 1986, January 1986, I was in afternoon homeroom, 9th grade, of Mr. Crosley's class. He was my homeroom teacher when I was in 9th grade. And I can remember one of the other teachers who I also had, he was a math teacher at the time, Mr. Guido. Yes, that was his last name, Guido. I remember him running into the class and getting Mr. Crosley and them leaving hurriedly, just leaving us kids there by ourselves. As you can imagine, fairly rare, especially if you're in 9th grade. You knew something was going on. You knew it. And then maybe a few minutes later, we found out what happened. Mr. Crosley came back and told us all what had happened. And this was, of course, way before the internet. Only a few people, I think, in Leechburg, where I grew up, had cable. So there was these TVs, in your history class that have all of the coverage. And instead of the teacher teaching anything, we just watch coverage of the investigation as to why Challenger blew up. Fascinating time for a 9th grader. Teacher isn't talking and you get to watch TV. Of course, it was a horrible circumstance. Horrible. But I've made the point, and this is the political angle of this, that with our space program, and this is the difference between government and business and private business. Had it been a private business that had done what the government did. Now, we know that NASA and the shuttle program was a combination of government and private industry. We know it was a private company that built those tanks that were attached to the shuttle, and one of their O-rings burst, and that's why the whole thing blew up. But it was government that was running the entire operation. It was government that decided to launch that shuttle, even though they knew that the temperature was outside what should be done. There were icicles hanging off. It's even hard to imagine that now that I live in Florida, that there were actually icicles hanging off the shuttle and its rockets the night before, and then into the morning of when they were going to do this launch. There were warnings from the engineers who built those O-rings and those boosters, saying, it was a little dicey. I don't know. We don't know if you should be doing it, but there was pressure to launch this shuttle, and they did it. And to my knowledge, who really paid for that? And I don't mean in dollars, but with their careers. Anybody? I know that a lot of changes were enacted. Of course, that didn't help the crew of Columbia all those years later. 17 years later. Of course, that was a different circumstance, but kind of the same issue with the people running the operation not taking a certain incident seriously, and that was one of these foam blocks falling off one of the rockets, hitting the wing of the shuttle, not understanding the damage that one of those sponges could do, flying at several hundreds miles an hour. But say it was private industry alone that had been running this operation, and this private company felt pressured. We need to get this rocket into space. And they put people's concerns to the side, engineers, experts' concerns to the side, and they did it anyway. And the rocket blew up, killing, how many were killed in Challenger? 7? Is that right? 7 people were killed? What do you think would happen to that business? Those CEOs would get caught up in front of Congress. They'd probably indicted. They'd surely have to pay huge fines. Maybe some of them would go to jail. But in Challenger's case, nobody went to jail. I'm not sure that I don't think there are any engineers who were working on Challenger that a year later they were pumping gas somewhere. Nothing. They just said, we'll fix it. It's like Benghazi. We'll get to the bottom of it and see what happened, but nobody's going to lose their job over this. Nobody's going to actually pay for this. It should be noted that more people got killed on Challenger than got killed at Benghazi. It's the difference. It just seems that government can get away with a lot more than private industry. And you may say, well, look at that Virgin Galactic crash from last year. Remember that? That was an accident. That was pilot error. It wasn't a design flaw. What do you call it? A rocket? I don't even know what you call the thing. Remember that happened? Was that New Mexico or Arizona, California last year? Forget what state, but that wasn't a design flaw. There wasn't somebody on the ground who felt rushed to launch that thing. That was pilot error, which is something totally different. But if these private startup companies, and I want you to know that I'm all for private industry getting into the rocketry business, getting into the going to space business. I'm for all of it. But what I know about it is they are not going to get the same kind of considerations that government has gotten over the last 50 plus years. The government has been sending people to space. We could go way back, what was it, Apollo 1, or what was it with Gus Grissom getting killed in a capsule on the ground during some test? Those 3 astronauts burned to death. And then you have Challenger, then you have Columbia. Columbia was another accident that could have been avoided. Say private industry had these kinds of deaths. What would happen? And it was based on engineering, not understanding a situation, cutting corners, not taking the elements seriously enough. Virgin Galactic, is that what it's called? I think it's called Virgin Galactic. And all these other companies, SpaceX, they'd all be out of business. The government would force them to go out. They would fine them. They would come after Richard Branson and all of them. All under the guise of, you guys are pushing the envelope too much, going after those profits. You're putting people's lives in danger, and we're shutting you down. Meanwhile, government can kill astronauts. They've killed, in the United States, 3, 7, how many were on Columbia? 5 or 6. So it's like they've killed 16 people, and that doesn't even count all of the other tests that they did before they sent everybody to space, and the astronauts that got killed during that, and they can get away with it. Whereas I want you to know, my standpoint is, when you're trying something dangerous like that, people are going to get killed. Both men and women are going to get killed. If their interest is going to space, flying in experimental vehicles, going where no one has gone before, not to pull out a Star Trek reference, people are going to die. That's part of it. But I know that our government looks at business doing it differently than when government does it itself. It's one of the big problems that we have in the United States. It's something that's overlooked. We have to remember that until, the 20th century? Explorers were considered, if you were an explorer, you pretty much were admitting to yourself that, you know what, you're probably going to die on one of these missions. That's just the way exploration goes. Whether it was in the 1400s, sailing the Atlantic Ocean, trying to find finding the New World, trying to find an opposite direction around the Earth to get to the Far East. Remember, that's originally what they were trying to do. Ships would go out into the ocean, never come back. Men would just disappear. It was just accepted. Just the way it goes. All in the means of progress. Men choosing to go out there. It was mostly men. And on these ships, wooden ships, using the wind as their propulsion. And that was just an accepted way of life. And had they been a little bit more cautious, lots of parts of the world still would probably not be discovered. We have to remember that. Death is a part of challenging boundaries. And government is perfectly fine with it if it's doing it itself, it seems. Whereas when private industry tries to do it, imagine an airline that had the success rate of NASA. The airline would be out of business. Imagine if a bus company had the success rate of NASA, be out of business. Car company, out of business. Remember how the government came down so hard on General Motors because of the Corvair. The government came down so hard on Ford for the Pinto. Now, were those cars, quote unquote, dangerous? Yes, they were. Not the greatest engineering feats that the United States has ever created. Okay? But government surely has a worse record than private industry does when the topic is transportation, doesn't it? And in the case, at least, of Challenger, the government sent that shuttle into space because they blew off all of these warnings from private industry. We need to get this launched. We're doing it. Boom, they did it. Never could Ford or General Motors get away with that kind of excuse. That's just the way it is, and it's not supposed to be that way. I do not think that our founding fathers would have believed that government can get away with more than private industry can. In fact, they probably would have looked at it the opposite. The government, no matter what it gets into, has to behave better than private industry does, and that is not what we have in the United States today. In fact, I would not say we have that pretty much anywhere in the world today. There is definitely a double standard out there that shouldn't exist. And once we can fix that, I think that you'd see a better government. I think we would. I think we would have a better government that's more responsible to the people. But as long as Government leaders, whether they're elected or just bureaucrats, part of the red tape, just hired with a resume, as long as they can get away with more than what happens in private industry, and it doesn't even have to do with deaths even, we're going to have problems. And so when we talk about as conservatives, small government and shrinking the government, that has to be part of it as well. That whatever standard we set up for corruption, and I want you to know there's always going to be corruption because we're human. We're flawed. We have sins. We have the 7 deadly sins. We try to use our knowledge. We try to cut corners. There's always going to be that. But it has to be even between government and the private sector. We try to get rid of it as much as we can. We're never going to get rid of all of it. But there has to be equal responsibility on both parts. Because like I said, if private industry had the success, had the lack of success that government has in sending people to space, none of these private space companies would be in business. They'd be fine. I mean, if the EPA is going to fine somebody $37,000 a day for a wetland violation, what are they going to do to a private company that's sending people to space and killing them? Of course, by accident. What would government do to that? To do to that company? I think we can imagine it would surely be more than $37,000 a day. Let's move on to something else. Still not going to talk about the debate tonight. It's also, so we have 30 years since Challenger, and that's, by the way, that's a documentary. I've watched so many different documentaries on the Challenger explosion. It's fascinating. I mean, I've watched a lot concerning Columbia as well. And I remember Columbia working at Star Trek. That anniversary, what would it be? The 13th anniversary of that is coming up in a couple days. It's funny how those two happen so close in the same time of year. I was at Star Trek, went in, I remember all those people watching it. I didn't even know what was going on. But I also remember a couple people that I knew the night before had lost their son their son got hit by a car. He was on his bike, got hit by a car, got killed. That's what I also remember about when Columbia blew up or got torn apart. That was a sad day. Charlie Hebdo. It's been a year since that shooting. A year. And I remember telling you all at the time, remember, there was that march that was had right after. Remember, all the world leaders got together and there was this big deal in the United States. Can you believe that Barack Obama didn't even show up for that? And what did I tell you? As you know, I'm no fan of Barack Obama. But what did I tell you? You know what? If I was president, I wouldn't show up either. Meet Ed Dentzel, right-winger, conservative, free market guy, laissez-faire guy, classical liberal guy, Austrian economics guy, tough on borders guy, tough on terrorism guy. I wouldn't show up either. And what did I say? Why did I say that? And as you know, a lot of my fellow conservatives gave Barack Obama a hard time. I did not. What did I say? I said I wouldn't march with those people because I know those people are not serious about stopping terrorism. That's what I said. A year ago I said that. I'm not going to march with people who are only out there to make themselves look good. They are not serious. And so what has happened in the last year? We have the Syrian refugee problem that all of those leaders were more than happy to take part in. Take those refugees in. They think they're doing God's work there. No doubt increasing the probability that these people that they're taking in will cause terrorist acts in their countries. That's happened since then. The Paris attack has happened since then. Once again, France not ready for an attack like that. None of these countries have changed their gun laws. They're all horrible, horrible gun rights countries. They all believe in gun control out the butt. Right? They have done nothing to stop terrorism in their countries. Even though they marched out there in solidarity, saying we can't put up with this. What these guys did, shooting up this was a newspaper magazine office, killing these people, killing at least one cop, and there's a video you can still watch, the cop's pleading for his life. I mean, they have cops that don't even have guns. That's why I wouldn't show up. I wouldn't want to be any part of it. And I predicted that a year ago. And it's worse now. Europe's situation is worse now than when Charlie Hebdo's the massacre happened a year ago. What can I tell you? That's why I wouldn't have shown up. They've learned nothing. These people, I should say the leaders and too many of their voters, because all of these European countries are democracies. They're not representative republics like we have, but they're all democracies. These people, they're getting the leaders that they elected, just like we in the United States have. They're getting exactly what they wanted. And a year later, those citizens of Europe are worse off, despite this massacre that happened a year ago. A magazine, you can dislike it for its tone, and it's making fun of everybody, and it being R-rated, if not X-rated. You can criticize that all day, but we as Americans, we should be better than that. The truth is, too many of those Europeans looked at Charlie Hebdo, and you could see that afterwards, and you can see that to this day. It's one more reason I wouldn't take part in that march. A lot of people in Europe blame Charlie Hebdo. Well, if they wouldn't have been doing that, they wouldn't have gotten shot up. Oh, really? Oh, really? And that attitude pervades Europe today. And dare I say it, there's a little too much of that in the United States as well. What do you think political correctness is? What do you think microaggressions are? And the people who claim that they're being offended. What do you think that all is? It's the same as these people who claim that Charlie Hebdo pretty much, really, kinda, sorta like asked for it. And now what do they have? Syrian refugees pouring into their country, using up all their government services, filling up emergency rooms, of course requesting the internet, better food, housing, getting in the way of the streets, getting in the way of commerce, rapes. Have you seen these pictures? Government leaders trying to show these Syrian refugees these pictures, because they don't speak English or French or anything. They're showing pictures. Yeah, you can't touch that woman's butt. Have you seen this? A year later after Charlie Hebdo. 2 months after the Paris attack. And they're still doing this. I don't know what to tell you. But it's been a year. I know it's gone so fast. That year has just gone so fast. And I wonder if any of these Europeans in any of those countries wake up at all now knowing it's been a year and can honestly and really are honest with themselves and say, you know what, I think we're worse off now than we were a year ago after the shooting. I thought that things were going to change. I thought this and I thought that, and it's worse now. I didn't think it could get any worse after Charlie Hebdo, and it is. Any European who wakes up today or woke up today and said that is correct. Even though I know that they're never going to admit to themselves the reasons. They're not going to change their minds. If Charlie Hebdo and Paris attack can't change your minds regarding terrorism, accepting all these refugees, I don't know what's going to do it. And in fact, I will make a prediction. A year from now, it'll be worse. On the 2-year anniversary of Charlie Hebdo, it'll be worse than on the 1-year anniversary. I got to go to the break. You've been listening to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio.
Real radio for real Americans. Red State Talk Radio.
This is Brigitte Gabrielle from actforamerica.org. Ladies and gentlemen, if you do not go to bed every night absolutely fatigued from trying to restore America from the destruction that is taking place, then you're simply not working hard enough. Arm yourself with knowledge so that you too can act for America by listening to Red State Talk Radio. Red State Talk Radio, the dominant force in conservative internet talk radio. RedStateTalkRadio.com. Lock it in and rip off the knob.
I can't defend my family because I live in Chicago.
I am free to defend my family with my AR-15 or handgun because I live in Wyoming.
I can't even protect myself if I'm attacked because I live in D.C.
I carry my 9mm in my purse anywhere I go in Texas.
I can't protect my small retail shop here in Brooklyn.
We keep guns behind the counter at our shop in Oklahoma. Only had to show it once.
Do you see a pattern?
Demand equal gun rights in America. Go to SAF.org now.
My name is Courtney Luster. I'm 21, well-educated, and unemployed American. I happen to be black, so I'm in the highest unemployment segment of the population, black youth unemployment. Notice I don't refer to myself as African American because I'm an American first. I'm a proud American who happens to have black skin. So please explain to me where African American fits into that equation. You're right, it doesn't. For over 60 years, the Democrat Party has used my fellow black Americans to maintain power in the federal and state governments. Why do I say that? Because I read history. While many of my friends are watching mindless videos, I choose to listen to Red State Talk Radio. Why? Because I want to educate myself, not entertain myself. Red State Talk Radio, America's premier conservative talk radio network. Hey, all you black American youth, be a Frederick Douglass Republican, not an Al Sharpton race pimp. Educate yourself. Listen to RedStateTalkRadio.com.
This is Michael Cutler, retired senior special agent with the former INS, the Immigration and Naturalization Service. You should know that I'm also a lifelong Democrat, but ladies and gentlemen, the mainstream media has completely failed the American people. That's why, despite being a lifelong Democrat, I listen to Red State Talk Radio, the dominant force in conservative internet talk radio. Lock it in and rip off the knob.
And we are back at the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. I forgot to mention something else that's going on in my life today, although I haven't done it yet. I'm going to. Picking up my gun today. The 3-day waiting list is up today. Went on Saturday, this past Saturday, picked out my new Glock 19. And I'm picking it up today. That is, if I passed the background check, which I should have. Of course, if the federal government, anybody in a position of power that makes decision on background checks is listening to the show, maybe I won't pass. Maybe when I go to pick up this gun, they'll say, the guy just be shaking his head saying, nope, can't give it to you. I have to give you your money back. I guess that could happen. I'll let you know. But I got a Glock 19. I'm excited about it. I'm taking a class on Sunday. Never shot a gun before, never owned a gun before. So yeah, I need some classes, and I want to be a good gun owner. I want to be a safe gun owner. I want to be a mature, conscientious gun owner. And I want to be there to protect myself. I want to be able to express my gun rights. I want to be able to protect my family, even though I'm not around them that much. I want to be able to, if it means protecting others, I want to be able to do that too. But most of all, I want to be a good gun owner. Okay? I want to be that. That's most important to me. Let's move on to something else. And I think the Glock 19 was a good choice. Didn't get the big Glock 17. And the Glock 26, just a little too small for my hands. Just don't like that pinky hanging down. And I know you can get the other magazines that kind of make the grip longer. But then you start thinking, well, if you're going to get the magazines that longer, you might as well just get the bigger gun. So that's how I decided on that. I tried the grips on a couple other guns. They just didn't seem right. Smith & Wesson, Winchester, and the Sig Sauer, beautiful guns. Just the guns are just beautiful. I mean, just the machining, just a magnificent piece of machinery. Absolutely impressed by all of them. But the Glock was the one that I went with, and I'm very excited about it. Oil. Still not going to talk about the debate tonight. Oil. I think that we've finally seen the first crack in OPEC and what they've been doing regarding pumping oil as if there's no tomorrow, which is a horrible cliche. Russia's main oil guy, do they have an oil czar? Russia's oil czar has come out and said that he's going to be talking to OPEC, and he could see a cut in production of about 5%. And if you haven't been following OPEC, you know OPEC's made up of all these different nations, and all of them, even though they've all been together for years, they are not in agreement as to how much oil they should be pumping. And in fact, for at least a year, countries like Nigeria, which is also part of OPEC, even though it's not in the Middle East, it's in Africa, and Venezuela, they're part of OPEC, even though they're not in the Middle East. They've been wanting to cut back production and drive the oil price back up because their economies rely so much on the price of oil. And when the price is down, they don't get as much tax revenue. Even though they're selling more gas, it just doesn't make up for it. More oil, it doesn't make up for it. And selling in quantity instead of, getting a higher price and getting a higher percentage of a higher price. Or I said the same percentage of a higher price, which is going to be more than percentage of a lower price. And Saudi Arabia has been driving that train, and they're the ones, since they are the biggest oil producer in OPEC, they kind of get to make the decisions no matter how much some of these other countries complain. Well, I've made the point, not recently, I haven't talked about oil in depth recently, but it's been fascinating to me to watch, that it's not so much that Saudi Arabia is putting itself in peril economically by the price getting so low. Now, I really believe when they decided to try to put other oil producers out of business, specifically here in the United States, they never thought that the price would get down to $30 a barrel. I mean, it was down to $27 a barrel sometime last week, and it's up into $32, $33 now, dollar range now for a barrel. That not only were they putting themselves in danger economically, but the leaders of Saudi Arabia in particular were putting themselves in danger politically. You got to remember that Saudi Arabia is a huge welfare state. That a lot of people there don't have jobs. They just get money from the government, and it's considerable because of all of the money that Saudi Arabia makes on oil. And with the price going down, Saudi Arabia has really had to dig into its savings to keep its citizens happy. And I cannot believe for a second that they ever thought, if they knew that was going to happen, let's say 2 years ago, they never would have tried to do what is going on now. They would have happily lost market share instead. But now they're in a situation where the price has gotten so low that they have to try to make it go the opposite direction, knowing that they're going to now lose market share in a worse situation than if they'd lost it 2 years ago. And to which I say, them's the breaks. That's just, I understand what they tried to do, but they miscalculated the ability of other countries, once again, specifically the United States, to adapt. And they didn't understand how willing some oil producers here in the United States, private people, private industry, small drillers, were willing to go into debt to combat OPEC. I'm not sure. I think that what's been going on a little bit in the United States is that there are a lot of Americans, good conservatives like myself and liberals, who are just sick of OPEC. There's too many adults who remember what happened back in the 70s and the oil problems that we've had and them kind of hanging this, this knife above us. If we don't do what they want, that they're going to drop this knife on us and the price of gas is going to go up, to $5 a gallon. That kind of sentiment has continued to this day. And so I think it's become in the United States more than just an economic battle. Well, they want to keep pumping more, then we're going to pump more. It's also a little bit of the revenge factor. It is. There's no doubt in my mind. I'm not in the oil business. I'd love to be in the oil business, but I'm not in the oil business, but I think that's what's going on. And there have been some guys, and hey, women are in this oil industry too. I'm not going to be sexist on that. There are people in the industry who just don't want to get beat by the Saudis for that particular reason. And it looks like these Americans they're in the oil industry are going to win. It's an ugly win. It might be a Pyrrhic victory. But when you see the Russians say this, I think there's something to it. We'll see. Granted, hasn't started yet, and I know Iran has come back on into the fray, and Iraq is pumping oil as busily as ever. But I think you're going to see some cutbacks, and I think at that point you're going to see the markets in the United States at least separate from oil, because right now, for the last few months, they've been a lockstep. The oil price goes down, the stock market goes down. The oil price goes up, the stock market goes up. And everybody's still trying to figure out, do we have this glut because of a lack of demand, or is it oversupply? It's probably a little of both, but what percentages does it break down to? Because that's important. If it's just 10% demand and 90% oversupply, that's not big of a deal. But if the world economy, if it's 75% lack of demand and only 25% oversupply, that's a bigger issue. It's a real bigger issue. So it's still trying to figure that out, and we're going to figure that out once some of these nations start cutting back. And I'm not so sure, though, the best part about this, I'm not so sure, at least in the United States, that a price of a gallon of gas is going to go up that much. I would predict that it's going to eventually. I mean, every price is eventually going to go up, I think, in 100 years due to inflation and everything else. But the reason here, I should say this, the reason that Saudi Arabia doesn't want to cut back production and has been not wanting to do that, yes, it's because they want to try to put as many places out of business as possible. But they know that if they cut back, the price is going to go up, and all that does is keeps other people in business. And so the price of a barrel goes from 30 to 35 to 40. Well, that only allows more people to jump back in. So while they're cutting back, other places are going to be jumping back in. And so it's a double effect. It's not just they cut back and all the producers say the same, the number of producers say the same, and just those number of producers take over their market share. It's like a double whammy. It's them cutting back, those current producers take some of their share, and new people jump in because of the price going back up because of Saudi Arabia and maybe Russia and these other companies cutting back. So it'll be, Saudi Arabia knows if it cuts back, it'll be all of these other countries and all these other manufacturers who benefit of the price going up because they're not going to stop pumping at all. You know, and I think I said this like a month ago. I think Saudi Arabia put themselves into like a coffin corner regarding, and that's an airplane term, that they pump too much, the price goes down, it hurts them. They back off, it hurts them as well. Just like if you're in a plane going close to the speed of sound at a high altitude, if you're in a plane that can't go the speed of sound, it's dangerous that you go just a couple mile per hour faster, the plane blows apart. You go a couple mile per hour slower, you fall out of the air. That's where Saudi Arabia is with oil. And they have no one to blame but themselves. I do believe a cutback is going to be happening within the next couple months. Then you'll see that separation between the market and oil. And already saw with the Fed statement yesterday that as much as the stock market, and when I say the stock market, I mean the NASDAQ, the S&P 500, the Dow, the big three indicators, three markets that they talk about on CNBC, Fox Business, and elsewhere. You see, even though they're been attached to oil, they're still more attached to what the Fed's going to do. As much as oil seems to have power over the markets right now, it's still the Fed. Fed comes out with a statement yesterday. It's a little wishy-washy. What's the markets do? They tank, despite oil going back up. And so we'll get back, once oil goes in the opposite direction, it's going to go back to more of what we're used to. Banks, the Fed, interest rates, and their relation to the market in contrast to what has been going on, which is oil and its relation to the market. Fascinating stuff. Of course, a lot of people are losing a lot of money, myself included. If you have investments, that's why I've made the point. All these people happy about gas prices. Yeah, you're saving $100 a month. Now the prices are in the $1.70 range. But look at your 401k and what it's doing. You're saving $100 a month, but you're losing $1,000 a month. Got to keep that in mind. Me personally, the way my finances are set up, I'd rather be making $1,000 a month and spending $100 more a month on gasoline. That's just me. A lot of people who live hand to mouth, it's a little different. So let's finally talk about the debate. I'm convinced of a couple things, and I have about 5 minutes to go. And I don't even know what's going to happen. I don't want to get into the specifics. These guys know what they need to do tonight. And like I said, you're listening to this after the debate happened. I'm convinced that Donald Trump made a huge mistake not doing this debate for a couple reasons. One, I could understand if he skipped the debate, stayed in Iowa, and conducted this fundraiser with the Wounded Warrior Project in Iowa. And did it for Iowa service members, men and women, all branches of the military. I get it. Still wouldn't totally agree with it, but then I'd understand. He's staying in Iowa. Where's he doing this tonight? South Carolina. I think that's bad. As I told you a couple days ago, Iowans take their place in the primary season very seriously. And any politician who tries to undermine that, whether not showing up for a debate or maybe if they're somebody that's high up in the RNC and says something, hey, maybe we should alter the schedule, Iowa shouldn't be first anymore. Iowans take that talk very seriously and they don't like it. They're very, very touchy. In fact, you could say that the only reason that corn subsidies even continue to exist is because of Iowa and its position in presidential politics. That's it. Corn subsidies would have been gone years ago if it weren't for Iowa being first. So when a politician or a person that's running for president decides not to show up, they take it out on that guy. They took it out on Ronald Reagan. Even in 1980, he lost Iowa. Now, granted, he went on to win and won in a landslide. And we also know that Rick Santorum and Mike Huckabee won in 2012, 2008, respectively. They didn't go on to get the nomination. But here's the difference between them, between Ronald Reagan skipping and Donald Trump skipping and these two other guys. Donald Trump takes any loss personally. He says he's inevitable. Well, one loss can get in the way of that. Ronald Reagan did not portray himself that way. He was a very humble guy. Rick Santorum, Mike Huckabee, they did not portray themselves that way, even though I'm not the biggest fan of either of them. Even I can say that about them. They were very humble in their approach to winning in Iowa. Donald Trump is not like that. So a loss there is not the same as Ronald Reagan losing in 1980. In addition, if he loses, it's kind of a crack at his persona, his ego, whatever else. In fact, some have said the reason that he's not appearing in Iowa, he didn't appear in Iowa for the debate, is because he's fearful he's going to lose, and he's going to use this as an excuse. I want to ask you, all you Trump supporters, I know you're listening, does this sound like making America great again? I just want to know. Running from a fight. Running from something you're afraid you're going to lose. Just not understanding that it's the fighting, it's the arguing, it's the contest is what matters. Winning and losing does not matter. It's standing up for your principles that matter. Whereas what we're finding with Donald Trump, his principles first are his ego. I've tried to tell you this. And I can only hope, now granted, it's not important that the rest of the United States thinks this right now, only the people in Iowa, that I hope they understand this. That he is not just acting like a brat toward Fox News. He's acting like a brat toward the entire state of Iowa. Now, as far as him acting, doing this against his fellow competitors, I get that. They all want to win, and they're all backstabbing each other, and they all want to undermine each other. But Donald Trump is throwing a huge insult at the people of Iowa. I hope they don't forget it. They're not going to forget it. I mean, it's Monday. I hope they don't look past it. I hope they don't forgive him. I hope that they just don't see this as some kind of just one-off behavior by him. Just a little teeny-weeny mistake on his part. We're sure that he's just going to get it back together. I hope they don't think that he'll shape up somewhere down the road. It's not going to happen. This is who he is. And I think I have to believe that it's going to cost him. And I'm not sure that I believe any of these polls right now. The polls in 2012 were way off regarding Iowa, so I can only believe that they're even way off right now because it shows him a little bit ahead. We'll see. You've been listening to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. I remind you can find my books at Amazon.com. Science fiction with a little conservatism mixed in if you're into that. Download them to your Kindle. Did I say that? You can email me at edwarddentzel@reagan.com. You can follow me on Twitter, Dentzel Domain, all one word, no space in between. edwarddentzel.com is my website. edwarddentzel.com /book is where you can download the first chapter of my next novel, The Comebacks, for free. You can do that for free. You can find me on Podbean, SoundCloud, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook. It's been a pleasure talking to you tonight. You've been listening to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio.